My name is Colleen Dyble, and I'm the Director of Coalition Relations at the Atlas Economic Research Foundation and the editor of the Institute for Economic Affairs publication, Taming Leviathan, Waging the War of Ideas. Through 13 chapters authored by intellectual entrepreneurs from around the world, Taming Leviathan shows how classical liberal ideas, ignited and transmitted through free market think tanks, has had a successful impact on changing the climate of ideas throughout the world. The intellectual entrepreneurs in this book are from 13 different countries from around the world, from Africa, Europe, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and North America. When I talk about intellectual entrepreneur, or IE for short, I'm referring to individuals that have identified a need and are able to use classical liberal ideas, are able to mobilize resources to address these problems. Each of the intellectual entrepreneurs in this book have been doing that and have done it successfully. The intellectual entrepreneurs in this book bridge the gap between the economic and the policy communities and use these ideas as solutions to these problems. It is through a keen awareness of the challenges to liberty and an intellectual fluency in these ideas that has made these IEs so successful. For the past 27 years, Atlas has worked with intellectual entrepreneurs all over the world. We help to identify new IEs, to mobilize them, provide resources, training, and a lot of that work is what I've been doing at Atlas for the past 7.5 years. We've worked with over 250 think tanks from around 100 countries in the world. This year alone, we've helped provide monetary and non-monetary resources for almost 200 think tanks. So as you can imagine, it's been very difficult to select just 13 for this book. Atlas was also founded by an intellectual entrepreneur by the name of Sir Anthony Fisher. Fisher was a World War II Air Force fighter pilot, a chicken farmer, and a self-made millionaire. Like many of the IEs in Taming Leviathan, Fisher was concerned about the encroaching socialism in Great Britain. He was able to secure a copy of F.A. Hayek's Road to Serfdom, a condensed version in Reader's Digest, and this book was very influential in his thought process. After that, he was able to secure a meeting with Hayek, who encouraged Fisher to go into the world of ideas opposed to politics as a way of changing this climate of ideas. Fisher ended up starting the first free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs in London. And it was this think tank that helped to then be a good model for other think tanks throughout the world. As most of you know, the IEA was the intellectual ammunition behind the Thatcher Revolution. After the IEA, Fisher went on to start several more think tanks before starting the Atlas Foundation in 1981. But the IEA model, the think tank model, has become one that many think tanks have used all over the world. This publication, Waging the War of Ideas, by the General Director of the IEA, has been an instrumental piece for think tank leaders throughout Atlas's network, and a piece that we use to build upon in doing the Taming Leviathan book. So over half a century ago, no one could have foreseen how Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, would change the course of Sir Anthony Fisher's life, that he would become one of the most influential actors in the growth of this libertarian free market movement. Likewise, I don't think any of the intellectual entrepreneurs in Taming Leviathan could ever have imagined this is what they would be doing with their lives. But I think if you asked any of them, they would tell you it's exactly what they felt like they were meant to do and something that they loved to do as well. Through my 7.5 years at Atlas, I've seen think tanks develop in some of the most challenging environments, whether it's Pakistan, Belarus, Venezuela, Zimbabwe. And something that always comes to my mind is, who are the people behind these think tanks? What are their personal stories? What are the environments that they're in? What is the impetus behind starting these think tanks? And Taming Leviathan has that personal story element. You'll learn about Elena from Lithuania, who started the Lithuanian Free Market Institute in an environment under a regime where the market was not even able to operate at all. She knew nothing from personal experience, only through reading. Or Attila Yela, who was basically a socialist before being introduced to libertarian ideas but he went on to start the Association for Liberal Thinking. Other IEs in Taming Leviathan started their think tanks because of political and economic situations in their country. Leon Lowe of the Free Market Foundation was able to use his institute as a catalyst in promoting policy changes before and after the apartheid. Christian Laurelay of Chile used his institute to help facilitate Chile's transition to a market economy. So Taming Leviathan shows that ideas do have consequences, and individuals who are persistent in arming themselves with ideological, principled arguments can directly influence public policy. For example, another one of the intellectual entrepreneurs in the book, Alex Magno, he started the Foundation for Economic Freedom in the Philippines, and was very instrumental in helping to open up the Philippines telecom industry. So these think tanks are very successful in minimizing barriers to economic growth, to suggesting appropriate roles for government, minimizing corruption, providing economic opportunities for economic development and freedom around the world. I was thrilled to have the opportunity to work on this book, not only because it's a great chance to showcase some of the institutes Atlas has been working with and how the IEA model has been a good example for them, but also because it provides an opportunity to talk to other people about free market think tanks. The economic crisis and the subsequent attacks on free market ideas show us that we cannot rest on past victories. We have to continue to be strategic about developing new ideas, new strategies for getting these ideas out. In a recent email to me and others in the freedom movement from Larry Reed, who was the president of the Foundation for Economic Education and the founder of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy in Michigan, he reminds us that in these tough times, it is our true character, the stuff we're really made of, that comes out. He says in the email, "If we retreat, that would tell me we were never really worthy of the battle in the first place. But if we resolve to let these tough times build character, teach us to be better and smarter at what we do, and rally our dispirited friends to new levels of dedication, we will look back on this occasion someday with pride about how we handled it." He encourages us and others in the free market movement to stand on the shoulders of people that have come before us, those who fought for freedom behind the Iron Curtain, Hayek and Mises, who kept the flame of liberty alive in the 30s and 40s when the world was bleeding statism. And I believe a lot of the intellectual entrepreneurs in Taming Leviathan are also those role models for people now and for people in the future who are looking back on how we weathered these difficult times. I hope the stories from these intellectual entrepreneurs in Taming Leviathan encourage and inspire those of you who are already engaged in the battle of ideas. And these provide new light, new inspiration for those of you who are not already engaged. I know that when these intellectual entrepreneurs look back on their lives, they will have known that they have fought for the ideas that they believed in and were successful in many of these policy battles. The lessons in this book prove that change is possible and that we arm ourselves with principled arguments. We can be successful in accomplishing change in our countries and promoting a more free and prosperous world.
Do all the think tanks work in the same way, or is it the case that some try to engage more with the intellectual community and others get more involved with political campaigning?
There's some similarities between these think tanks in terms of, they're all trying to promote free market ideas, and a lot of them are starting to use similar communication avenues, whether that's new Web 2.0 technology, Facebook, social networking, blogging, podcasts. They all have different models and target audiences. For example, some are focused on geographic related issues, so whether that's state or country-based issues. Some have more of a regional focus. Other think tanks can be defined based on their key programs. Some are involved in just working with students. Others are working with parliamentarians. Others are involved in just doing pure traditional think tank research. The ones that do more the political advocacy are the ones that are engaged more in the political debate. There's also groups that are watchdog groups. They're providing accountability either to the government or other government organizations. There's groups that litigate, that work on various cases as they relate to abuse of freedom and rights. And there's ones that are focused on policy topics, whether it be health care or taxation. And lastly, there's groups that have very specific niches, like the Acton Institute that works just with religious leaders. And so I think it's, while they're working on the same battles, they have different ways that they get involved in different audiences.
Do you see new challenges for free market think tanks coming from the recent problems in financial markets and the potential backlash against the market economy that might result?
Yes, unfortunately I do, and a lot of our think tanks have been in dialogue about this over the past few weeks and months. The problem rests largely in misperceptions about what started the crisis. Conventional thought will say it's capitalism and not enough government, whereby the real root of the reason is not that. And so free market tends to be dragged through the mud a little bit now. Our groups are having to deal with environments where people are seeing more government intervention as the solution to some of these problems, and capitalism becomes the bad guy. Free markets become the bad guy. People think that it was the market that was unfettered that was the problem in this crisis. And so our groups are starting to see an additional challenge to what they had before to this. And so it makes the work of these think tanks even more important, and it makes us have to be much more accountable to ourselves and to each other to make sure that we're giving messages that are completely foolproof, that are solid and accurate when it comes to promoting these free market ideas. So it's definitely something that has been challenging, but luckily we do have a large network and growing network of think tanks that are rallying together to address some of these issues.
Is there potential for greater global networking of think tanks to make their case on issues such as free trade and against undermining of the market economy by organisations such as the UN, or is all the action ultimately at national level?
The intellectual entrepreneurs don't know one another. They can be operating in the same city, in the same country, on similar issues, and they just don't know. And so we help to create a lot of these alliances. We've already seen coalitions built on many of these issues stemming from the crisis. In fact, after the European Resource Bank in October in Georgia, many think tanks banded together on a joint statement saying that more government involvement is not the solution to this crisis. And they signed a statement that they were able to promote as a cohesive group opposed to just individual think tanks. There's other groups such as the Civil Society Coalition on Climate Change, which is another networking organization of think tanks that are involved in climate change issues. And they're able to give a louder, more prominent voice because they are together talking about the free market perspective on some of these issues. There's also groups, the Center for Freedom and Prosperity has their Coalition for Tax Competition. Other groups that will be coordinating, this group coordinates resources, free market organizations pertaining to tax competition and financial privacy and physical sovereignty, all these issues that the EU, UN is working on. So they're providing that, again, that free market voice. And lastly, there's several Google groups that have been established where groups can come in and post things on whether it be wikis on certain issues or emailing back and forth. This new age, we've really been able to identify technology that allows people from opposite ends of the earth to come together and dialogue about certain issues. So it's very encouraging to see people coming together as, again, a unified voice on some of these issues, and Atlas has helped quite a bit in this process to try to bring people together.